Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller mini TV series named The Edge of Sleep Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with a man named Dave who suddenly wakes up from a nightmare. His colleague, who was working the night shift with him, looks at him in astonishment. They replay the security footage and see Dave's head droop as he falls off his chair onto the floor. Little did he know, this fall actually saved his life. Barely making it through the shift, his friend Mateo suggests they go to a late-night hormone party hosted by a friend. Dave initially refuses, but changes his mind upon hearing that his ex-girlfriend will also be there. He tags along with Mateo to a remote house, but as soon as he enters, he regrets his decision. The party had long since ended, and his ex-girlfriend had already left. Only a few people remained, too wired to sleep. Frustrated, Mateo complains about his friend not waiting for him and accidentally bumps into someone sleeping. To everyone's shock, the person isn't breathing. Dave urges them to call emergency services, but the lines are busy. He rushes upstairs to seek help from the homeowners, only to find the couple inexplicably dead. Dave's first thought is a gas leak, and he prioritizes getting the 3 victims to a hospital. After driving for several tense minutes, Dave and Mateo arrive at the hospital, only to find the ambulance bay doors wide open, suggesting a bad omen. They rush inside to discover hallways filled with corpses. Grabbing a nurse, Dave explains the urgency, but she shakes her head after checking the victims. They've been dead for over 2 hours. She suggests calling the police. Dave, frustrated, argues that the hospital should at least handle the bodies, but the nurse, Linda, explains they're overwhelmed with a sudden influx of deaths that night. Defeated, Dave decides to wait until morning when the hospital staff will be fully available. While waiting, he notices a father and daughter sitting across the hallway. The daughter gently advises her father to get some rest. At the same time, Linda kindly suggests a colleague take a break after working through the night. Within half an hour, Dave watches in horror as the father starts foaming at the mouth. Rushing to alert the daughter, he finds that both father and daughter have mysteriously died. Linda checks on her colleague and discovers they've also stopped breathing. The 3 survivors realize a terrifying truth: people are dying in their sleep. The situation seems too bizarre to believe, but Linda considers calling the police again, only to face busy lines or no answer. Determined, she decides they must visit the station in person to prevent more deaths. By now, the sun has risen. The trio hastily gets into a car and heads toward the town center. However, Linda notices something unsettling and shouts for Mateo to stop the car. She yells at him, saying there's not a single person on the streets. Dave, puzzled, looks around. Linda fires a gun into the air, waiting for someone to react, but no one does. Dave, unwilling to give up, enters a nearby apartment and finds a dead couple in their bedroom. The grim reality sinks in. The entire town has been affected by this sleep death. Heading to the police station is now pointless. The only priority is warning their loved ones not to fall asleep. Dave immediately calls his ex-girlfriend, but her phone is off. Mateo and Linda face similar frustrations. All their relatives have likely succumbed during the night. Linda suggests contacting night shift workers who might still be awake. Mateo proposes using the local radio station to broadcast a warning. As the 3 prepare to leave, their car breaks down. While Mateo works on repairs, Dave tries calling his ex again. This time she answers. However, her tone is icy. She scolds Dave for bothering her sexy body, saying she's exhausted after a sleepless night and is about to go to bed. Dave grew increasingly anxious, but his girlfriend wouldn't even give him a chance to speak. Left with no other option, he decided to rush over and warn her in person. Mateo, irritated, muttered about him being a simp and went back to fixing the car. While chatting with Mateo, Linda learned that both Mateo and Dave were former soldiers, with Mateo having been an air pilot with extensive mechanical knowledge. Sure enough, it didn't take long before Mateo had the car running again. The 2 quickly drove to the radio station where their fears were confirmed. The entire staff had perished. Meanwhile, Dave was on his way to his ex-girlfriend Katie's house, knowing every minute that passed increased her danger. Along the way, the sight of countless bodies reinforced the urgency. Panting and desperate, Dave finally reached Katie's home. Without hesitation, he kicked the door open gently and rushed to the bedroom, only to find the bed empty. As he stood there bewildered, a blow landed on his back. It was Katie, mistaking him for a burglar. Dave hurriedly explained the situation, begging her not to fall asleep like a pig, but Katie accused him of using excuses to get close to her sexy body again. She reminded him of the far-fetched nightmares he used to share, and as she spoke, she tried calling the police to catch this weirdo. As Dave predicted, the line was unresponsive. At that moment, Linda's voice came through the radio, broadcasting a warning for everyone to stay awake. It was only then that Katie realized Dave was telling the truth. Soon, Linda and Mateo arrived at Katie's apartment, and the four gathered to discuss their next steps. They knew they couldn't stay awake indefinitely. Dave, with his experience of chronic insomnia, warned them that after 48 hours, people begin to experience hallucinations, paranoia, and even psychotic breakdowns. Linda insisted they must find the cause of the sleep-death phenomenon, or they'd all be doomed. The group decided to return to the hospital, where Linda planned to use medical equipment to examine the bodies. On the way, Katie heard faint moaning from a nearby corridor. She entered a room and discovered an elderly woman alive on a hospital bed. Linda explained that the woman had cancer and required medication to fall asleep, which inadvertently saved her from the deadly sleep phenomenon. Linda reminded everyone to stay focused as she prepared for an autopsy. She handed out stimulant pills to help them stay alert temporarily. Meanwhile, Mateo, increasingly alarmed, attempted to contact the FBI and the CDC, but all calls went unanswered. The group began to suspect the disaster might have spread globally. Donning surgical attire, Linda selected a patient who had died in their sleep. Mateo and Dave recorded the procedure while Linda conducted the autopsy. As she cut into the skull, a strange, smoky vapor escaped. The group was stunned to discover a mysterious triangular symbol etched into the brainstem. Dave froze in terror. He had seen this symbol before in his nightmares. He didn't share this revelation, while the others speculated about the symbol's origin, baffled at how it could be etched so precisely without invasive surgery. Linda, overwhelmed by the inexplicability of it all, struggled to process the discovery. Meanwhile, Dave sat in a corner, piecing together fragments of his recurring dreams. Katie noticed his unease and pressed him for answers. Under pressure, Dave finally revealed his secret. He had been plagued by a rare condition since childhood that caused recurring nightmares whenever he fell asleep. These nightmares featured grotesque, bloody-faced figures, including a terrifying elephant man and a sinister masked figure. In these dreams, he had been killed countless times, and the triangular symbol was a recurring mark on his body. Katie, who had dismissed his stories as smelly nonsense during their relationship, now believed his bullshit. Guilt consumed her for doubting him in the past. Back in the hospital, Linda was preparing to change the elderly woman's medication when the patient suddenly asked why her family hadn't called her yet. Time ticked by, and Linda wheeled the woman into the exam room for monitoring. Sensing something unusual, she alerted Dave and Katie, who ran to find the exam room door locked. Inside, Linda had decided to let the woman sleep to monitor her death using advanced equipment. Katie called her insane, but Linda stood firm, explaining that the woman had volunteered, knowing her loved ones were dead and seeing no reason to live alone. Despite the others' desperate pleas, the woman closed her eyes and soon passed away. Linda analyzed the brainwave data and found unusual activity in 2 regions just before the heart stopped. She concluded the woman had died in a dream. Mateo was incredulous, while Dave pointed out that he had died countless times in dreams but was still alive. A heavy silence fell over the group. Breaking the silence, Dave asked how long it took for the elderly woman to die after falling asleep. Linda estimated 3 minutes. Dave proposed a daring experiment. He would fall asleep to experience the dream that could kill and discover how it worked. Mateo objected vehemently, calling it suicidal. Dave acknowledged the risk and instructed them to wake him after 3 minutes. Once prepared, Dave lay down and immediately slipped into a dream, having gone over 40 hours without sleep. In the wet dream, he found himself on a desolate plain, his feet shackled with heavy chains, rendering him immobile. A voice echoed from the sky, telling him he's thirsty and he must drink. Desperate, Dave crawled toward a nearby lake, but the chains held him back. Watching the shimmering water just out of reach, an unbearable thirst consumed him. Suddenly, his deceased mother appeared, holding a glass of water. Overcome with emotion, Dave reached for it, only to see the triangular symbol reflected in the water. His mother's voice turned sinister as she urged him to drink this water, and his thirst will be quenched. Dave was about to drink when a giant whale swept across the sky, and not far ahead stood the shadowy figure of the masked man. The masked man waved off Dave's mother, urging him to take a closer look at the cup. Dave finally realized the symbol on the cup was the same terrifying mark the elephant man had left on his body in his dreams. Memories rushed back to Dave. The masked figure had appeared many times in his dreams, repeatedly urging him to join their cause. Before vanishing, the masked man uttered a single word, Aristera. In the blink of an eye, Dave's mother transformed into the elephant man. At that moment, Linda forcibly woke Dave, pulling him out of the dream just 2.5 minutes after he'd fallen asleep. Shaken, Dave recounted his dream. He was certain that drinking the water would have been fatal. It appeared that some mysterious force was manipulating people's dreams, turning their deepest fears into reality and causing their deaths in their sleep. Thankfully, the masked man had intervened to help him. Dave recalled an island called Aristera and speculated that it might hold the key to breaking the dream death curse. Although the idea sounded absurd, the group had no better alternatives. They decided to take the risk and cling to this sliver of hope. Mateo checked the map and noted that even by plane, reaching Aristera Island would take over 10 hours, a daunting prospect given that they had already been awake for more than 50 hours. Frustrated, Dave asked if they were just supposed to sit there and wait to die. The group quickly agreed to press on. Packing their belongings, they prioritized anti-fatigue medications. With everything ready, Mateo psyching himself up as the driver, they set off for a private airstrip to secure a plane for the journey to the island. During the car ride, Dave, briefly idle, felt a wave of drowsiness wash over him. Fighting to keep his eyes open, he was horrified to discover that Katie had fallen asleep. Panicking, Dave grabbed a syringe of adrenaline from his bag and injected it into Katie. She jolted awake with a gasp. The shock cleared the group's exhaustion, and before long they arrived at the airstrip. As expected, there wasn't a single soul in sight. Mateo quickly selected the most impressive-looking plane, skimmed the manual, and confidently started the engine. Soon, the private jet was soaring into the blue sky. Dave knew the hardest part was yet to come. Katie was the first to succumb to exhaustion, her eyes silently closing. Linda tried the adrenaline trick again, but this time it had no effect. Dave let out a guttural roar of despair as Katie passed away. The grief was short-lived, overtaken by a bone-deep fatigue. Mateo, the pilot, was also struggling. He bit into his own arm hard enough to draw diabetic blood, but even that wasn't enough to keep his heavy eyelids open. Linda noticed his condition and administered a dose of medication. Though it revived him temporarily, she warned it couldn't be repeated. Dave's situation was worse. He began seeing vivid hallucinations, fully aware they weren't real but unable to dismiss their striking clarity. Just as Dave was about to lose his grip, Mateo spotted Aristera Island in the distance. With no runway available, he was forced to make a water landing. Amid the violent turbulence, the plane plunged into the ocean. By some miracle, Dave, Mateo, and Linda made it safely to shore. The peril of the landing and the shock of the cold seawater banished their sleepiness. Dave felt a strange familiarity with the island, having seen it many times in his dreams. He knew that reaching the mountain's summit would lead them to salvation. But halfway up, an intense pain struck their minds, and the next thing they saw was Katie lying in a coffin. Beside her, a figure in white urged them to rest and keep her company. Dave realized this was the Elephant Man's doing, a ploy to stop them from reaching the summit. With great effort, he crawled to the coffin and said a final farewell to Katie before sealing it shut. In an instant, the vision vanished, and the group found themselves back on the mountainside. Looking up, they saw a stone structure standing atop the summit, suggesting their final destination. An elderly man appeared and greeted them with a reassuring smile, saying they were safe now. Moments later, they were led into a secluded community populated by survivors from around the world. The elder explained that all of them had been summoned here by the masked man to escape the curse. Dave, filled with questions, asked who was behind the effort to wipe out humanity. The elder smiled cryptically and replied, "That's a question only the masked man can answer." Before long, Dave entered the stone structure and finally came face to face with the masked man from his dreams. The figure revealed that the world had been invaded by malevolent spirits. As guardians of nature, they had begun recruiting fighters from across the globe to resist the invasion, and Dave was among those chosen. Dave, puzzled, asked if this meant the fight wasn't over. The masked man nodded gravely. Around them, the people who had died in their dreams began to awaken, their eyes glowing with the eerie triangular symbol. And so concludes Season 1 of this drama. It remains to be seen how the few survivors on Aristera Island will face the overwhelming army of undead now under the control of the malevolent spirits. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.